The knife trembled in Clara's hand as she pressed herself against the rotting wall, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "You don't understand," she whispered to the stranger who'd just walked into the abandoned ranch. "They killed your uncle for this land, and when they come back tonight, they'll kill us both unless you agree to my terms." Caleb Dawson stared at the desperate woman hiding in his dead uncle's house, dust motes dancing between them like ghosts. "What terms?" he asked, though something in his gut already knew the answer would change everything. "Friends, if you want to know how a drifter and a runaway schoolteacher brought down the most powerful crime ring in the West, stay with me till the end, and drop a comment about where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these frontier tales travel. The desert heat shimmered off the broken fence posts like water that would never come, creating illusions of movement where there was only death and stillness. Caleb Dawson pulled his horse to a stop at the edge of what had once been the finest ranch for 50 miles in any direction. Now, 3 months after his uncle's death, it looked like the earth itself had tried to reclaim it. Sagebrush pushing through the porch boards, sand drifting against the barn doors, buzzards circling overhead as if waiting for the last breath of civilization to finally expire. He'd been riding for 6 days straight from Colorado, chasing a telegram that had found him in a saloon in Denver. His uncle dead, the ranch his, come at once. The lawyer's message had been terse, almost fearful, and now Caleb understood why. This wasn't just abandonment, this was deliberate destruction. The main gate hung crooked on one hinge, the Dawson brand burned into the wood, now split down the middle like a broken promise. Caleb dismounted his boots, hitting the dust with a soft thud that seemed too loud in the oppressive silence. His horse, a sturdy bay named Moses, snorted nervously and pawed the ground. "Easy, boy," Caleb murmured, running a hand along the animal's neck. "Just a dead ranch. Nothing here but ghosts and regrets." How wrong he would prove to be. The path to the main house was overgrown with desert weeds, their thorns catching at his pants legs like desperate fingers. Every step kicked up dust that hadn't been disturbed in weeks, maybe months. The windows of the house stared out like empty eye sockets, most of them broken, their glass teeth scattered across the porch in glittering accusation. Caleb paused at the front door, which stood slightly ajar. The wood around the lock was splintered as if it had been forced open with violence rather than a key. He drew his Colt .45, the weight of it familiar and reassuring in his hand. His uncle Tom Dawson had been a careful man, a veteran of the Apache Wars who knew how to protect what was his. This damage wasn't from neglect, it was from intrusion. The door creaked on its hinges as he pushed it open with his boot keeping his gun raised. The smell hit him first, dust, decay, and something else. Something alive. Recent smoke from a cooking fire maybe, or the lingering scent of human habitation. Someone had been here. Recently. "Hello." His voice echoed through the empty rooms. "Anyone here?" "This is Caleb Dawson. This is my property now." Silence answered him, but it was the wrong kind of silence. The kind that held its breath. The kind that watched. He moved through the front room, noting the overturned furniture, the pictures torn from walls, the books scattered across the floor like dead birds. His uncle's study was worse. The desk had been hacked apart with an axe, papers burned in the fireplace, the safe standing open and empty like a scream. That's when he heard it. A soft scraping sound from upstairs, like something being dragged across the floor. Caleb's military training from his days as a cavalry scout kicked in. He moved to the stairs, testing each step before putting his full weight on it, avoiding the ones that would creak. The banister was broken in places as if someone had fallen or been thrown against it. Dark stains on the wood looked suspiciously like dried blood. The scraping sound came again from the last room at the end of the hall, his uncle's bedroom. Caleb approached slowly, his gun steady despite the sweat beading on his forehead. The door was closed, but light leaked out from underneath it. Not sunlight, but the flickering orange glow of a candle or lamp. He reached for the doorknob with his left hand, keeping his right on the trigger. The door exploded open before he could turn the handle. A figure burst out, small, fast, desperate. Caleb caught a glimpse of wild auburn hair and a pale dress before something sharp slashed at him. He jerked back, feeling the blade whistle past his ribs, and grabbed for the attacker's wrist. They crashed into the wall together, Caleb using his weight to pin the smaller figure, finally getting a grip on the hand, holding what he now saw was a kitchen knife. "Drop it." he commanded, pressing the wrist against the wall until the knife clattered to the floor. That's when he finally saw her clearly. A woman maybe 25 years old with green eyes that burned with terror and defiance in equal measure. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, her hair a tangled mess, her face smudged with dirt and what might have been tears. But it was the expression on her face that stopped him cold, not just fear, but the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that came from running too long with nowhere left to go. "Please," she gasped, still struggling against his grip. "Please, I didn't—" "Stop fighting," Caleb said, trying to keep his voice calm. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm Caleb Dawson. This was my uncle's ranch." She went still at his words, those green eyes searching his face with desperate intensity. "Dawson? You're Tom Dawson's nephew." "That's right, and you are." She laughed, but it was a broken sound like glass grinding underfoot. "Dead. We're both dead if we're still here when they come back." Caleb released her wrist but kept his body between her and the knife on the floor. "When who comes back?" "What are you talking about?" "The men who killed your uncle," she said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "They've been using this place as a way station. They'll be here by nightfall, and when they find us—" She trailed off, wrapping her arms around herself as if trying to hold her body together. "Start from the beginning," Caleb said, holstering his gun to show he meant no threat. "What's your name?" "Clara. Clara Whitmore." She glanced toward the window where the sun was already beginning its descent toward the horizon. "We don't have time for the whole story. We need to leave. Now." "This is my land," Caleb said firmly. "I'm not running from anyone." Clara's laugh this time was sharper, almost hysterical. "Your land? Your uncle thought the same thing. They put 6 bullets in him for that belief. They'll put 12 in you just to make sure the lesson sticks." "Who are they?" "The Scorpion Gang, Luther Vaughn's men." She said the name like it tasted of poison. "They run guns to the Apache traffic women to the mining camps and murder anyone who gets in their way. Your uncle found out what they were doing. He tried to stop them." Caleb felt something cold settle in his stomach. He'd heard of Luther Vaughn everyone west of the Mississippi had. The man was a ghost story told in saloons, a nightmare that rode the desert wind. If Vaughn was involved in his uncle's death— "Why are you here?" he asked. Claire's jaw tightened. "I was cargo. Being transported to a brothel in Mexico. I escaped when they stopped here 2 nights ago. I've been hiding, waiting for them to give up looking, but they always come back here. This is their safe house now." "And you think they'll return tonight?" "I know they will. They have a shipment coming through, guns stolen from Fort Grant. They always use this ranch as the exchange point. It's isolated enough that no one hears the screams." Caleb walked to the window, peering out at the dying light. Sure enough, he could see dust on the horizon riders maybe an hour out. "How many will—" "Usually 6 or 7, sometimes more." Clara had retrieved the knife, holding it like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to the world. "We need to go, please. There's nothing here worth dying for." "My uncle thought there was. And look where it got him." Caleb turned to study her more carefully. Despite the dirt and exhaustion, there was something refined about her features, an education in the way she spoke. "You're not from around here." "Boston originally. I came west to teach school in Tucson. The stage was robbed. The other passengers were killed. I was kept." Her voice went flat on the last word, and Caleb didn't need to ask what that meant. "How long?" 3 weeks. 3 weeks of being passed around like property beaten when I resisted, starved when I spoke out. Your uncle's ranch was supposed to be my last stop before Mexico. After that, she shrugged a gesture that contained all the hopelessness in the world. Caleb made a decision that would have seemed insane to anyone who didn't have Dawson blood running through their veins. "We're not running." "Are you insane?" "Probably, but this is my land and you're under my protection now. We're going to face them." "You can't fight 7 men." "Not planning to fight them, planning to outsmart them." He moved to his uncle's wardrobe, pulling it open to reveal a hidden compartment he remembered from childhood visits. Inside were 2 rifles, boxes of ammunition, and something else, a leather journal wrapped in oilcloth. "What's that?" Clara asked. Caleb opened the journal, scanning the pages filled with his uncle's careful handwriting. Names, dates, locations, shipments, everything documented with military precision. "Evidence. My uncle was building a case. He knew he couldn't fight them alone, so he was gathering proof to take to the federal marshals. Fat lot of good it did him. He didn't have something they need, Caleb said, a plan forming in his mind. He didn't have you. Clara's eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? What? You're escaped cargo. They want you back. That gives us leverage. Leverage? I'm not going back to them. I'll die first. She raised the knife, and Caleb realized she meant it. The blade was turned toward her own heart. You won't go back and you won't die, he said quickly. But they don't know that. Look, you said they use this place regularly. That means they feel safe here, comfortable. We can use that against them. How? By giving them exactly what they expect to find a woman alone in an abandoned house. Meanwhile, I'll be positioned where they won't expect. When they let their guard down, you'll kill them all. Clara's voice held a mixture of hope and skepticism. If I have to, but I'm hoping it won't come to that. If we can capture even one of them alive with this journal as evidence, we can bring down the whole operation. Clara stared at him for a long moment. You're either very brave or very stupid. Bit of both, probably. It's a family trait. He handed her one of the rifles. Can you shoot? I taught myself over the last 2 days. I'm not Annie Oakley, but I can point and pull a trigger. Good enough. Here's what we're going to do. The sun was touching the horizon by the time they finished their preparations. Caleb had positioned himself in the barn loft with a clear line of sight to the house's front door. Clara waited inside, visible through the broken windows, but with cover nearby if shooting started. The journal was hidden in Moses's saddlebags, ready for a quick escape if everything went wrong. They heard the horses before they saw them, the thunder of hooves mixing with rough laughter and crude songs. 7 riders, just as Clara had predicted, led by a man whose face looked like it had been carved from old leather and bad intentions. Luther Vaughn himself, if the descriptions Caleb had heard were accurate. The gang pulled up in front of the house, dust swirling around them in the dying light. Vaughn dismounted first, his spurs jangling with each step. "Little bird," he called out, his voice carrying across the desert air. "I know you're in there, Clara girl. Saw your tracks around the well. Why don't you come out and save us all some trouble?" Clara appeared in the doorway, the rifle held loosely in her hands. She'd changed into a cleaner dress they'd found, making her look more like a frightened schoolteacher than a desperate fugitive. It was all part of the performance. "Stay back," she called, her voice trembling just enough to be convincing. "I'll shoot." Vaughn laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "With Tom Dawson's old rifle, girl, that thing probably hasn't been cleaned in months. Besides, you ain't got the stomach for killing. I can see it in your eyes." "I've got stomach enough," Clara replied, raising the rifle to her shoulder. Now, Vaughn said, holding up his hands in mock surrender. "No need for unpleasantness. Boys, spread out. Little bird's got herself a stick, but she can't point it at all of us at once." The other men began to dismount, moving to flank the house. Caleb tracked them through his rifle scope, waiting for the right moment. 3 heading left, 2 going right, 1 staying with Vaughn. They were trying to surround her, but in doing so, they were spreading themselves thin. "I've got a proposition for you, girl." Vaughn continued, walking slowly toward the porch. "You come quiet-like, and I promise you'll go to a high-class establishment, somewhere with silk sheets and champagne. Fight us, and well, there's worse places than Mexico for a pretty thing like you." "I'd rather die," Clara spat. "That can be arranged, too." One of the other men called out, earning harsh laughter from his companions. Caleb drew a bead on the man who'd spoken, a younger outlaw with a fancy pearl-handled pistol. He'd be the first to drop if shooting started, but he held his fire, waiting to see if Clara could sell the next part of their plan. "Wait," Clara said suddenly, lowering the rifle slightly. You said high class." Vaughn's grin widened, sensing weakness. "That's right. You're too pretty for the mining camps, girl. Worth more in a place where gentlemen pay gold for their entertainment. And I'd be, treated well. Like a queen," Vaughn lied smoothly. "Why, in a year or 2, you might even buy your freedom. Some girls do, the smart ones anyway." Clara let the rifle droop further, her shoulders sagging in apparent defeat. I'm so tired of running." "Course you are. 3 days in the desert with no food. You must be about done in. Why don't you put down that rifle and come here? We've got water food. You must be hungry." It was the opening they'd been waiting for. Clara set the rifle against the doorframe and took a tentative step onto the porch. All eyes were on her now, the men relaxing as they sensed victory. That's when Caleb saw it movement in the desert behind the gang. Another rider approaching fast but quiet, using the gang's own dust cloud as cover. He couldn't make out details in the growing darkness, but something about the rider's posture suggested official business. Law of some kind. He had to make a decision. Wait and see who the newcomer was, or spring the trap now while the gang was distracted. Clara made the choice for him. She suddenly stumbled on the porch, crying out as she fell to her knees. It was perfectly executed, drawing every eye, and causing several of the men to move instinctively forward to help or capture her. "Now!" she shouted, rolling behind the thick porch railing. Caleb's first shot took the pearl-handled gunslinger in the shoulder, spinning him around and dropping him into the dust. His second shot went through Vaughn's hat, deliberately high but close enough to send the message. "Nobody move!" Caleb shouted from the barn. "Next one goes through somebody's skull." The gang froze, caught in the open with no clear target to shoot at. Vaughn's hand hovered over his pistol, calculating odds. "That you, Tom Dawson," he called out, "thought we killed you." "Tom's dead," Caleb replied. "I'm his nephew, and this is my land now." "Your land?" Vaughn laughed, though there was less confidence in it now. "Boy, your uncle thought the same fool thing. Look where it got him." "My uncle didn't have the journal," Caleb said, watching as the mysterious rider got closer. "The one with all your transactions documented. Names, dates, shipment details. Even got the judge's signature on some interesting papers." Vaughn went very still. "You're bluffing." "My June 15th, 20 rifles to the Apache at Skeleton Canyon. June 28th, 6 women from the stage robbery near Tombstone. July 4th, ironic date for it meeting with Judge Harriman about the Fort Grant weapons. Should I continue?" The silence stretched taut as a hangman's rope. Then Vaughn made his move, drawing his pistol in one smooth motion. But Clara was ready. She'd retrieved the rifle and fired from her position behind the railing, the bullet catching Vaughn in the thigh and dropping him to one knee. All hell broke loose. The gang members scattered, firing wildly at both the barn and the house. Caleb dropped another man with a chest shot, then had to duck as bullets splintered the wood around him. Clara kept low firing when she could, keeping them from rushing the house. That's when the mysterious rider arrived, and Caleb's heart sank as he recognized the uniform. A federal marshal, yes, but riding alone into a gunfight, the man was either very brave or very stupid. "Federal marshal!" The newcomer shouted, his voice carrying surprising authority. "Everyone drop your weapons." One of Vaughn's men made the mistake of turning to shoot at the marshal. The lawman's response was swift and lethal. 2 shots center mass, and the outlaw was dead before he hit the ground. "I said drop them." This time the remaining gang members complied. With their leader wounded, 2 of their number dead, and now caught between 3 guns, the fight had gone out of them. Caleb climbed down from the loft, keeping his rifle trained on the survivors. The marshal dismounted, his own weapon steady as he approached. In the lamplight spilling from the house, Caleb could see he was older, maybe 50, with gray streaking his beard and the kind of eyes that had seen too much. "Marshal William Foster," the man said. "Got word there might be trouble out here. Looks like I arrived just in time." "Caleb Dawson, this is my ranch." "And the lady, Clara emerged from the house, still holding the rifle. "Clara Whitmore, These men kidnapped me." Foster's expression darkened as he looked at Vaughn, who was trying to stop the bleeding from his leg. "Luther Vaughn, been tracking you for 2 years. Looks like your luck finally ran out." "This ain't legal," Vaughn growled. "You got no jurisdiction here." "Federal marshal has jurisdiction everywhere when it comes to gun running and kidnapping," Foster replied. "Besides, Judge Harriman won't be helping you this time. We arrested him this morning." Vaughn's face went pale beneath the dirt and blood. "You're lying." 10 ledgers of evidence say otherwise. Your operation is finished, Vaughn." Foster looked at Caleb. "You mentioned a journal." Caleb nodded. "My uncle documented everything. It's hidden, but I'll get it for you." "Your uncle was Tom Dawson, good man. I'm sorry for your loss. He'd been feeding us information for months, but we lost contact with him 3 weeks ago." "They killed him," Clara said quietly. "Murdered him when he tried to stop them from using his ranch." Foster's jaw tightened. Then we'll make sure they hang for it. All of them. It took another hour to secure the prisoners and tend to the wounded. The pearl-handled gunslinger would live, though he'd never use his right arm properly again. While Vaughn's leg wound was serious, but not fatal, he'd lived to stand trial. The others were tied up and ready for transport. As Foster prepared to leave with his prisoners, he turned to Caleb and Clara. I'll need you both to testify. The trial will be in Tucson probably in a month or so. We'll be there, Caleb assured him. Good. And Mr. Dawson, your uncle would be proud. You did right by his memory today. After the marshal and his prisoners disappeared into the darkness, Caleb and Clara stood alone in front of the damaged house. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving exhaustion in its wake. You saved my life, Clara said softly. You saved mine right back, young, Caleb replied. That was good shooting. I was terrified the entire time. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing what needs doing despite the fear. Clara looked at him, something shifting in her expression. What happens now? The marshal's gone, but more of Vaughn's men might come looking for revenge. Then we'll be ready for them, Caleb said. This ranch needs rebuilding anyway. Might as well fortify it while I'm at it. I'm not. I should probably head back to Tucson. Try to find work, start over. Caleb turned to face her fully. You could do that. Or you could stay here, help me rebuild this place. I could use someone who can shoot straight and think quick. Besides, you're a teacher, right? The nearest school is 20 miles away. The ranch families around here would probably pay well for someone to educate their children. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a home if you want it. Safe place to heal, to figure out what comes next. No obligations, no expectations, just a roof over your head and honest work if you want it. Clara's eyes glistened in the moonlight. Why would you do that for me? You don't even know me. I know enough, Caleb said simply. I know you're a survivor. I know you're brave. And I know my uncle would have done the same. The Dawsons have always stood for protecting those who need it. She was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the desert that stretched endlessly in all directions. All right, but on one condition. What's that? You teach me to shoot properly. If I'm staying in this godforsaken wilderness, I want to be able to protect myself. Caleb smiled, the first genuine smile he'd managed since arriving at the ranch. Deal. We'll start tomorrow. They stood together in the darkness, two strangers bound by violence and circumstance, not yet knowing that this was just the beginning. The Scorpion Gang had more members than those captured tonight. Judge Harriman had powerful friends who wouldn't appreciate his arrest. And somewhere out in the desert, forces were already mobilizing to reclaim what they saw as theirs. But for now, in this moment, Caleb and Clara had won their first victory. The ranch that had seemed dead and haunted just hours ago now felt like possibility, like hope. Like the first page of a story that would become legend in the Arizona Territory, the tale of how a drifter and a schoolteacher stood against an empire of outlaws and won. Inside the house, damaged but not destroyed. A candle flickered in the window. It was a small light against the vast darkness of the desert, but it was enough. It said that someone was home, that this land was claimed, that the fight for justice in the lawless West had found new champions. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. Change was coming to the territory whether the outlaws liked it or not. And at the center of that change stood two unlikely allies, their partnership forged in gunfire and sealed in trust. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, for the first time in weeks, Clara Whitmore felt safe. And for the first time in years, Caleb Dawson felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The Dawson Ranch was no longer abandoned. It was defended, and that made all the difference. The morning sun crept through the broken windows like a thief, illuminating the devastation that last night's darkness had hidden. Clara stood in what had once been the kitchen, sweeping glass shards into a pile, while Caleb worked to board up the worst of the damage. They'd barely slept, taking turns on watch, jumping at every sound the desert night produced. We need supplies, Caleb said, hammering another board into place. Food, ammunition, materials to fix this place properly. I'll ride to Bitter Creek today. Clara paused in her sweeping. That's Vaughn's territory. Everyone there is either bought by him or terrified of him. Was his territory. Word of his capture will spread fast. Besides, we need to know who our enemies are and who might become allies. He tested the board's stability, satisfied when it held firm. You should come with me, safer than staying here alone. I can't. The words came out sharper than she intended. When Caleb looked at her questioningly, she set down the broom and wrapped her arms around herself. Some of Vaughn's men, they took me through Bitter Creek when they first captured me, paraded me through town like a prize. The people there, they saw me and they did nothing. I can't face them. Not yet. Caleb's jaw tightened. He'd seen that kind of shame before in soldiers who'd survived when their brothers hadn't. Clara, what happened to you wasn't your fault. I know that here, she touched her head, but here, she placed her hand over her heart, is different. Give me time. Let me get stronger first. He wanted to argue, to tell her that hiding wouldn't heal those wounds, but he recognized the steel in her voice. This was her battle to fight in her own time. All right, but I'm leaving you both rifles and plenty of ammunition. First sign of trouble, you fire 3 shots in the air. I'll hear it and come running. How long will you be gone? Half a day, maybe more if I have to wait for supplies to be gathered. I'll be back before dark, I promise. Clara nodded, trying to look braver than she felt. As Caleb saddled Moses, she found herself fighting the urge to beg him not to leave. 3 weeks of captivity had taught her that being alone meant being vulnerable, and the ranch's isolation, which should have felt like safety, instead reminded her how far help would be if she needed it. Hey, Caleb said softly, reading her expression. You survived 3 days alone in this house before I arrived. You can handle 1 more. That was different. I was nobody then, just a runaway. Now I'm the woman who helped capture Luther Vaughn. That makes me a target. It makes you dangerous, Caleb corrected. Remember that. You're not prey anymore, Clara. You're a hunter who knows how to bite back. She managed a small smile at that. Hurry back. Count on it. Caleb mounted Moses and rode out, leaving Clara standing in the doorway with a rifle in her hands and fear coiling in her stomach. She watched until he disappeared over a rise, then went back inside and barricaded the door. The ride to Bitter Creek took 3 hours through country that alternated between desert scrub and rocky canyons. Caleb kept his eyes moving, watching for ambush, but saw only jackrabbits and the occasional hawk circling overhead. The road showed recent wagon tracks, but nothing fresh enough to worry about. Bitter Creek appeared like a mirage, its buildings clustered around a natural spring that gave the town its name and its life. It wasn't much, maybe 40 buildings, including houses, a main street with essential businesses, and a church whose bell tower leaned slightly to the left. But in this part of Arizona territory, it was civilization. Caleb tied Moses outside the general store, noting how conversations stopped as he walked past. News traveled fast in small towns, and a stranger arriving the morning after Luther Vaughn's capture was bound to draw attention. He kept his hand casual, but ready near his pistol, projecting confidence he didn't entirely feel. The general store was dim and cluttered shelves stocked with everything from flour to ammunition to patent medicines that promised to cure ailments that hadn't been discovered yet. Behind the counter stood a thin man with nervous eyes and hands that wouldn't stop moving. "Help you?" the man asked. His voice pitched higher than normal. "Need supplies, food, ammunition, building materials." Caleb set a list on the counter. "I'm rebuilding the Dawson Ranch." The clerk's eyes widened. "You're Tom Dawson's nephew, the one who, last night." "That's right." The man looked around nervously, though they were alone in the store. "Mister, you should know that Vaughn has friends. Had friends. Maybe still has them. They won't take kindly to what you did." "Let them come," Caleb said evenly. "My uncle's land is mine now, legally and properly. Anyone who has a problem with that can discuss it with me directly." Brave words, but brave men fill graveyards around here. So do cowards. At least brave men get better headstones. Caleb tapped the list. "Can you fill this order or not?" The clerk studied the list, doing calculations in his head. "Take me a few hours to gather everything. Cost you plenty, though. Lumber's scarce since the sawmill burned down last month. Vaughn's doing..." Nobody can prove nothing, but the owner had been talking about going to the federal marshals about something he'd seen. Fire started the night after he said that. Him and his whole family barely got out alive. They left for California the next day. Caleb filed that information away. More evidence of Vaughn's reign of terror if they needed it for the trial. I can pay. Have everything ready by noon. He left the store and walked down the main street, taking the town's measure. The saloon was already open, piano music drifting through the batwing doors. The bank looked prosperous, too. Prosperous for a town this size, which suggested money flowing through that wasn't entirely legal. The sheriff's office had boards over the windows and a closed sign that looked permanent. You're either very brave or very stupid, Mr. Dawson. Caleb turned to find a woman watching him from the doorway of the hotel. She was perhaps 40, well-dressed in a way that suggested money and taste, with sharp brown eyes that missed nothing. People keep telling me that, Caleb replied. I'm starting to think it might be true. I'm Mrs. Elizabeth Carver. I own the hotel and several other businesses in town. She stepped into the street, her bearing regal despite the dust and heat. I knew your uncle. He was a good man. You're one of the few willing to say so out loud. The few of us left who remember what this town was like before Vaughn arrived. She studied him carefully. Is it true you captured him? The federal marshal has him. He'll stand trial in Tucson. And the woman, the teacher they took, she's safe. Mrs. Carver's expression softened slightly. Good. What they did to her, parading her through town like that. Some of us wanted to help, but Vaughn had men with guns on every corner. Anyone who interfered would have been shot. I'm not judging anyone for surviving, Caleb said. But things are going to change now. Vaughn's operation is finished. You think it's that simple? Mrs. Carver laughed, but there was no humor in it. Vaughn was just one head of the Hydra, Mr. Dawson. Cut it off, and 2 more grow back. He had partners, backers, people in high places who profited from his activities. They won't just let this go. Then I'll deal with them too. She looked at him for a long moment, then seemed to make a decision. Come to my hotel. There's someone you should meet. Intrigued, Caleb followed her across the street. The hotel's lobby was surprisingly elegant, with real wallpaper and a crystal chandelier that seemed impossibly delicate for such a rough town. Mrs. Carver led him to a private dining room where a man sat alone at a table studying what looked like legal documents. The man stood as they entered, tall, well-built, with prematurely gray hair and the calloused hands of someone who'd done real work despite his current refined appearance. His suit was quality but practical, and a sheriff's badge gleamed on his vest. Caleb Dawson, meet John Mercer, Mrs. Carver said. John used to be the sheriff here until Vaughn had him run out of town. He's been working to build a case against the gang from the outside. Mercer extended his hand, his grip firm. Mr. Dawson, I heard about last night. That was well done. You heard already. I have friends who keep me informed. I've been staying just outside town waiting for the right moment to move. Your actions may have provided that moment. The sheriff's office is boarded up, Caleb observed. Vaughn's men burned it after they ran me out. Killed my deputy would have killed me too if Elizabeth hadn't hidden me in her root cellar. Mercer's expression darkened. I've been documenting their crimes ever since working with the federal marshals when I could. Your uncle was helping me. Nobody mentioned you. Because officially I'm dead. Vaughn's men think they killed me when they burned my house. It's been useful being a ghost. I can move around, gather information, build alliances with people too scared to openly oppose Vaughn. How many allies are we talking about? More than you'd think, fewer than we need, Mrs. Carver interjected. Maybe 20 men willing to fight if they believed we could win. Most of the town just wants to survive. What about Vaughn's remaining men? Mercer pulled out a piece of paper sketching a rough organizational chart. Vaughn had about 30 men total. You killed or captured 7 last night. That leaves 23, but they're scattered across the territory. The immediate threat is his lieutenant, Jake Colton. He's got maybe 8 men with him, and they're camped about 10 miles north of here. When word reaches them about Vaughn, they'll come for revenge, Caleb finished, or they'll try to take over the operation themselves. Colton's ambitious and mean as a snake. Only thing that kept him in line was fear of Vaughn. So we need to move fast before he consolidates power. Mercer raised an eyebrow. You planning to take on 8 men by yourself? Not by myself, with whoever's willing to stand up and fight for their town. Mrs. Carver shook her head. People are scared, Mr. Dawson. They've seen what happens to those who resist. Your uncle's death is still fresh in their minds. Then we need to show them that hiding is no longer the safer option, Caleb said. Colton won't just maintain the status quo. He'll be worse than Vaughn trying to prove himself. Everyone who showed even the slightest resistance will be targeted. You're right, Mercer admitted. But fear is a powerful chain to break. Then we start small. Who in town has the most to lose if Colton takes over? Mrs. Carver and Mercer exchanged glances. Sam Rodriguez, Mrs. Carver said finally. He owns the largest ranch outside town. Vaughn was pressuring him to sell, wanted to use his land for moving stolen cattle. Sam refused, but he's been paying protection money to keep his family safe. The Hendricks brothers, Mercer added. They run the freight company. Vaughn forced them to transport his contraband, but they've been documenting everything, hoping for a chance to turn evidence over to the law. And Dr. Marcus Campbell, Mrs. Carver continued, he's been treating people Vaughn's men hurt, keeping them alive when Vaughn would prefer them dead as examples. He's walking a tightrope. Get them here, Caleb said. Quietly. We need to organize before Colton hears about Vaughn. While Mrs. Carver sent discreet messages, Caleb returned to the general store to check on his supplies. The clerk had worked faster than expected, perhaps motivated by equal parts fear and hope. As Caleb supervised the loading of a wagon he'd purchased, he noticed a rider approaching fast from the direction of his ranch. His hand went to his gun, then relaxed as he recognized the horse, one of the spare mounts from his uncle's stable. But the rider wasn't Clara. It was a boy, maybe 14, riding hard with fear written across his face. Mr. Dawson, the boy called out, nearly falling from the saddle in his haste to dismount. Miss Clara sent me. There's trouble. Caleb grabbed the boy's shoulders, steadying him. What kind of trouble? Men came, 5 of them. She's holding them off, but she said to get you quick. Said to tell you it's Colton. Caleb's blood went cold. Somehow Colton already knew about Vaughn and had moved faster than expected. When did they arrive? Maybe an hour ago. I was bringing eggs from our farm to trade with Miss Clara for reading lessons. She'd promised to teach me. When I saw the men, I hid in the rocks. She saw me and signaled for me to ride for help. You did good, son. What's your name? Tommy, sir. Tommy Martinez. Tommy, you ride to the hotel, find Sheriff Mercer and Mrs. Carver. Tell them what you told me. Tell them we need men at the Dawson Ranch now. Yes, sir. As the boy ran off, Caleb quickly unhitched Moses from the wagon and swung into the saddle. The supplies would have to wait. He spurred the horse into a gallop, racing against time and praying he wouldn't be too late. The 3-hour ride to the ranch became 2 through sheer determination and Moses's heart. Caleb pushed the horse harder than was safe, taking dangerous shortcuts through arroyos and over rocky terrain that could have lamed them both with one wrong step. He heard the gunfire before he saw the ranch sporadic shots that suggested a siege rather than an all-out assault. That was good. It meant Clara was still alive, still fighting. He dismounted a quarter-mile from the house, approaching on foot through the cover of a dry creek bed his uncle had shown him years ago. The scene that greeted him was both better and worse than he'd feared. Clara had indeed barricaded herself in the house, using overturned furniture to block windows and doors. The attackers had taken positions around the building, content for now to keep her pinned down. But Caleb could see they were preparing something, bundles of dry brush and what looked like oil-soaked rags. They were going to burn her out. Jake Colton stood in the open, confident in his control of the situation. He was a big man, built like a prizefighter with scarred knuckles and a face that had been rearranged by violence more than once. He was calling out to Clara, his voice carrying across the desert air. Come on out, girl. We know Dawson's gone to town. You're all alone and this house is going to get mighty hot in a few minutes. Save yourself the pain of burning. Come out now and I promise to make it quick. Clara's response was a rifle shot that kicked up dust at Colton's feet, making him dance backward with a curse. Feisty little thing, ain't you? Colton laughed. I can see why Vaughn wanted to keep you for himself. But Vaughn's not here anymore, is he? I'm in charge now, and I say you're more trouble than you're worth. Caleb counted the attackers' positions. 5 men, just as Tommy had said. 2 at the front of the house, 1 on each side, and 1 watching the back. Colton made 6 standing bold as brass in the open. They were spread out but focused on the house, not expecting an attack from behind. He worked his way carefully around to the barn where he'd have elevation and cover. From there, he could see Clara through one of the windows. She was moving between positions, making it seem like there were more defenders than just her. Smart girl. But she was running low on ammunition, he could tell by how sparingly she was shooting. One of Colton's men lit a torch, preparing to throw it onto the roof. Caleb couldn't wait any longer. He sighted down his rifle, took a breath, and squeezed the trigger. The man with the torch spun and fell the burning brand, dropping harmlessly into the dirt. Before the echo died, Caleb had already shifted targets, putting a bullet through the shoulder of the man nearest to him. "It's Dawson!" someone shouted. "He's in the barn." The attackers scrambled for better cover, their attention divided now between the house and the barn. Clara took advantage of the confusion, firing at a man who'd exposed himself while running, catching him in the leg and dropping him with a scream. "You're outnumbered, Colton," Caleb called out. "Mercer and 20 men are right behind me. Give up now and you might live to see trial." It was a bluff, but Colton had no way to know that. The outlaw leader looked around, calculating odds. 3 of his men were down, the element of surprise was lost, and if reinforcements really were coming— "You're lying!" Colton shouted back, but there was uncertainty in his voice. "Tommy Martinez made it to town an hour ago," Caleb replied, which was true enough. "You really think the good people of Bitter Creek are going to let you take over Vaughn's operation? They've had enough of living in fear." One of Colton's remaining men, younger than the others, threw down his gun. "I'm out, Jake. This ain't worth dying for." "You yellow bastard!" Colton roared, but the damage was done. The last standing attacker was already backing toward his horse. Colton stood alone, his rage palpable in the afternoon heat. "This ain't over, Dawson. You and that whore are dead. You hear me, dead." "The only thing I hear is a coward making empty threats," Caleb replied. "Get on your horse and ride, Colton. Next time I see you, I won't give you the chance to run." For a moment, Caleb thought Colton might try to draw on him anyway. The man's hand hovered near his gun, trembling with fury. Then from the direction of town, a dust cloud appeared, riders at least a dozen of them coming fast. Colton saw it too. With a final curse, he mounted his horse and spurred it hard to the north, leaving his wounded men behind. The one who'd surrendered sat down in the dirt, hands raised, while the 2 wounded men groaned and clutched their injuries. Caleb emerged from the barn as Clara stumbled out of the house. Her dress torn, her face streaked with gunpowder and sweat, but alive and unharmed. She took 3 steps toward him before her legs gave out, the adrenaline finally abandoning her. He caught her before she hit the ground, holding her as she shook with delayed reaction to the fight. "You did good," he murmured. "You did real good." I thought you wouldn't come in time," she gasped against his chest. "When I saw them riding up, I thought this was it." "I'll always come," he said, meaning it. Always. The riders from town arrived in a thunder of hooves, Mercer leading them, with Mrs. Carver riding astride like a man. To Caleb's surprise, the Rodriguez family, the Hendricks brothers, Dr. Campbell, and a handful of other townspeople who'd finally found their courage. "Looks like we missed the excitement," Mercer said, surveying the scene. "You arrived just in time to help with the cleanup," Caleb replied, "and to witness that the town of Bitter Creek won't tolerate outlaws anymore." Dr. Campbell was already tending to the wounded outlaws, professional despite their crimes. The young one who'd surrendered was talking rapidly to Mercer, eager to trade information for leniency. And Mrs. Carver was organizing the others, giving orders with the natural authority of someone born to lead. "This is just the beginning," she said to Caleb. "Colton will be back with more men. Then we'll be ready." Sam Rodriguez spoke up. He was an older Mexican rancher, weathered by sun and hardship, but standing straight with newfound purpose. "My vaqueros are good fighters. They've been wanting to stand against these bandits for months." "My drivers, too," one of the Hendricks brothers added. "We're tired of being forced to haul contraband." "We need to organize properly," Mercer said. "Form a real militia setup, watches coordinate defenses. This ranch is strategic. It controls the main route through the valley. If we can hold it, we can cut off the gang's supply lines," Caleb finished. "Make it impossible for them to operate." Clara had recovered enough to stand on her own, though she stayed close to Caleb. "The women in town," she said suddenly. "The ones like me who've been brought here against their will. Some are still trapped in the saloon, in the back rooms. If we're really going to clean up this town, we'll free them all, Mrs. Carver said firmly. I've been keeping track. There are 6 women currently held against their will in various establishments. With Vaughn gone and Colton on the run, now's our chance. Then we move tonight, Mercer decided, before anyone can organize resistance. As the group made plans, Caleb noticed Clara watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. What is it? You came back, she said simply. You heard I was in trouble and you rode back alone against 5 men. 6, he corrected. And you were holding your own just fine. But you came back, she repeated. In my experience, people don't do that. When things get dangerous, people leave. They save themselves. Maybe you've been around the wrong people. She smiled, then the first real smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, revealing the woman she must have been before violence and fear had marked her. Maybe I have. That evening, as the sun painted the desert in shades of gold and crimson, the newly formed Bitter Creek militia rode into town. 23 men and women armed and determined, led by a sheriff everyone thought was dead, and a rancher who'd inherited more than just land from his uncle. They struck simultaneously at 3 locations: the saloon, a boarding house that was actually a prison, and a warehouse where kidnapped women were held before being moved south. The few gang members left in town, leaderless and outnumbered, surrendered without much fight. The 6 women they freed were in various states of distress but alive. Clara took charge of them, her own experience making her uniquely qualified to offer comfort and practical help. She set them up in Mrs. Carver's hotel, where they could recover in safety and dignity. One of them, a young Irish girl named Maggie, clung to Clara's hand with desperate strength. They said no one would come. They said we were forgotten. You were never forgotten, Clara told her. It just took us a while to get strong enough to fight back. As midnight approached, Caleb stood on the hotel's porch, looking out at the town that was already beginning to transform. The sheriff's office would be rebuilt. The honest businesses would thrive without paying protection money. The families who'd lived in fear could walk freely again. You started something, Mercer said, joining him. Something that's going to spread beyond Bitter Creek. My uncle started it, Caleb corrected. I just finished what he began. No, you did more than that. You gave people hope. That's more powerful than any gun. Clara emerged from the hotel looking exhausted but satisfied. The women are settled. Dr. Campbell is treating their injuries. Mrs. Carver is finding them clothes and necessities. What about you? Caleb asked. What do you need? She considered the question. A bath, a meal that isn't hardtack and beans, and about 12 hours of sleep in a bed that doesn't have bullet holes over it. I think we can arrange that. But first, she said, moving to stand beside him, I need to say thank you, not just for today, but for everything, for believing I was worth saving, for giving me a chance to fight back, for showing me I'm stronger than I thought. You showed yourself that, Caleb said. I just gave you the opportunity. She stood on her toes and kissed his cheek, a gesture as unexpected as it was gentle. Don't minimize what you've done, Caleb Dawson. You're a good man in a land that's short on them. Before he could respond, she was gone, disappearing back into the hotel. Mercer chuckled beside him. That one's got spirit. She does, Caleb agreed, touching the spot where her lips had brushed his skin. So what's next? Mercer asked. Colton's still out there. He'll regroup, maybe join forces with other gangs. This isn't over. No, it's not, Caleb admitted. But we've got something now that we didn't have before. We've got unity, we've got purpose, and we've got proof that these bastards can be beaten. The federal marshals will send more men once they hear what we've accomplished, Mercer said. I've already sent word. Within a week, we should have real support. A week's a long time. Colton could do a lot of damage in a week. Then we don't give him the chance. We hunt him down first. Caleb turned to look at the sheriff. You're talking about taking the fight to them. I'm talking about ending this properly. No more living in fear, no more waiting for the next attack. We know where their camps are, where they hide their stolen goods. With the element of surprise, it's risky. Everything worth doing is. Caleb thought about Clara, about the 6 women they'd freed tonight, about all the others who'd suffered under Vaughn's reign of terror. When do we ride? Dawn. I'll gather the men. As Mercer walked away to organize the militia, Caleb remained on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the clear desert sky. Somewhere out there, Jake Colton was nursing his rage and planning revenge. The man was dangerous, more so now that he was cornered and desperate. But Caleb wasn't the same man who'd ridden into his uncle's ranch just 2 days ago. He'd found purpose here, found something worth fighting for. And maybe, just maybe, found something worth living for, too. The sound of footsteps made him turn. Clara stood in the doorway, clean now and wearing a borrowed dress that actually fit. Can't sleep. Too much to think about. She joined him at the porch rail. Mercer told me about the plan. You're going after Colton. We have to. He won't stop until someone stops him. I know. She was quiet for a moment. I want to come with you. Clara, I know what you're going to say. It's too dangerous. I should stay here where it's safe. But safe is an illusion, Caleb. I learned that the hard way. The only real safety comes from being strong enough to protect yourself and having people you trust watching your back. You've been through enough, which is exactly why I need to do this, she interrupted. I need to face them not as a victim, but as someone who fights back. Can you understand that? He could. The need to reclaim power, to transform from prey to predator, he'd seen it in soldiers who'd been captured and escaped. You'll stay with the supply wagon with Dr. Campbell. If fighting starts, I'll defend myself and others. I'm not looking for revenge, Caleb. I'm looking for justice, and maybe a little peace. Peace comes hard in the territory. Then we'll have to fight for that too. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the town settle into sleep. Tomorrow would bring violence and danger, but tonight there was a moment of calm, a moment of possibility. Your uncle would be proud, Clara said softly. I hope so. I know so. You've honored his memory in the best way possible by continuing his fight. Our fight now, Caleb corrected. Our fight, she agreed. The first pale light of dawn found 30 riders assembled at the edge of town, their breath misting in the cold desert morning. Caleb checked his weapons one final time, while Clara helped Dr. Campbell load medical supplies into the wagon. The rescued women from the night before stood on the hotel porch wrapped in shawls, watching their liberators prepare to finish what they'd started. Mercer rode up alongside Caleb, his face grim in the early light. Scout just returned. Colton's holed up at Devil's Canyon with about 15 men. They've got the high ground and plenty of ammunition. Devil's Canyon, Sam Rodriguez muttered, crossing himself. That place is a natural fortress. The Apache used to make their stands there against the cavalry. Which is exactly why Colton chose it, Mercer said. One way and steep walls on all sides. They could hold off 100 men from those positions. Then we don't go in the front door, Caleb said, remembering something his uncle had told him years ago. There's another way. The Apache knew it, and so did my uncle. He showed me once when I was a boy. A back way into Devil's Canyon. Mercer leaned forward with interest. Not exactly back. More like over. There's a trail along the rim barely wide enough for a horse. It comes out on a ledge overlooking their probable camp. We could split our forces, half create a distraction at the main entrance while the others come from above. That's suicide if they spot you on that trail, Rodriguez warned. No cover, nowhere to run. Everything about this is risky, Caleb replied. But Colton won't expect it. He's counting on that canyon to protect him. Clara had approached during the discussion, and now she spoke up. I know that trail. Some of Vaughn's men talked about it when they thought I was unconscious. They said Vaughn never posted guards there because only a fool would try it. Or someone desperate enough, Caleb said. I'm going with you, Clara stated. It wasn't a question. Clara, you'll need every gun on that rim trail, and I'm a good shot now thanks to your teaching. She met his eyes steadily. Don't try to protect me from this, Caleb. I need to be there when it ends. Before he could argue further, a commotion arose from the street. A rider was approaching fast from the south, swaying in his saddle. As he got closer, they could see blood soaking his shirt. It's Jim Patterson, someone called out. From the Bradley Ranch. Dr. Campbell rushed forward as the man practically fell from his horse. They hit the Bradley place at dawn, Patterson gasped. Killed old man Bradley, took his daughter Sarah. Said she was replacement for the women you freed last night. Clara's face went white. Sarah Bradley was only 17, a sweet girl who'd planned to be a schoolteacher like Clara. How many men? But 8, maybe 10. Not Colton's bunch, different gang. Called themselves the Comancheros. Said the territory's up for grabs now that Vaughn's gone. Where did they take her? Mercer demanded. North toward the old mission. Their leader man named Cesar Mendoza said to tell you that anyone who interferes will end up like Bradley. Caleb looked at Mercer. Their carefully planned attack on Colton would have to wait. We can't let them get far with that girl. But if we chase the Comancheros, Colton will have time to strengthen his position or escape, one of the Hendricks brothers pointed out. Then we split up, Mercer decided. I'll take 15 men after the Comancheros. Caleb, you take the rest and hit Colton as planned. We can't let either group think we're weak. That spreads us thin, Rodriguez warned. We don't have a choice, Caleb said. That girl needs help now, and if we let every gang think they can raid with impunity, we'll never have peace. Clara was already moving toward her horse. I'm going after Sarah. Like hell you are, Caleb said. She's terrified, probably hurt, and surrounded by men who see her as property. She needs a woman there when we free her, someone who understands what she's going through. Clara's voice was steel. I'm going with Mercer. Caleb wanted to argue, wanted to forbid it, but he saw the determination in her eyes. This wasn't about revenge or even justice anymore. It was about preventing another woman from suffering what she had suffered. Fine, he said roughly. But you stay back when the shooting starts. I'll do what needs doing, she replied, which wasn't agreement at all. Mercer quickly divided the group. The pursuit party mounted up Clara among them and rode hard to the north. Caleb watched them disappear into the dust, his chest tight with worry, before turning to his own men. All right, we stick to the plan. Rodriguez, you take 8 men to the canyon mouth. Make noise, draw their attention, but don't commit to a full assault. Give me 2 hours to get into position on the rim, then start your demonstration. And if Colton tries to break out, let him run but follow. We want him panicked, not thinking clearly. As the group separated, Tommy Martinez appeared at Caleb's elbow. The boy had refused to go home, insisting he could help. Mr. Dawson, I want to come with you. This isn't a game, son. I know that. My pa was killed by Vaughn's men 6 months ago. I got a right to be part of this. Caleb studied the boy's face, seeing determination that belonged on someone much older. The frontier had a way of aging children fast. Can you shoot? Yes, sir. Pa taught me. Then you can come, but you stay with the horses when we reach the rim. Someone needs to guard our retreat route. Yes, sir. The trail to the rim was worse than Caleb remembered. Years of erosion had narrowed it even further, and in places the edge crumbled away into a 500-foot drop. The horses were nervous, sensing the danger, and the men had to dismount and lead them for the most treacherous sections. This is madness, muttered one of the townsmen, pressing himself against the canyon wall as pebbles cascaded into the void. Madness is letting these outlaws control our lives, Caleb replied, though his own heart was pounding. One wrong step, one spooked horse, and they'd fall to their deaths. It took 90 minutes to reach the ledge overlooking the canyon floor. As Caleb had hoped, they could see Colton's camp below tents. Horses men moving about casually, unaware of the threat above them. A few sentries watched the main entrance, but none looked up. Like shooting fish in a barrel, someone whispered. Don't get cocky, Caleb warned. These men are killers. The moment we open fire, they'll scatter for cover and return fire. We need to make our first volley count. He positioned his men along the ledge, making sure each had good cover behind the rocks. Tommy stayed back with the horses, as ordered, though Caleb could see it killed the boy to miss the action. Below they could hear the distant sound of Rodriguez's group beginning their distraction war cries and gunfire echoing off the canyon walls. Colton's men rushed to defensive positions facing the entrance, their backs to the rim. Wait for it, Caleb murmured, sighting down his rifle at Colton himself. The big man was shouting orders, organizing his defense. Wait! The outlaws were fully engaged now, firing at Rodriguez's men, all their attention focused forward. Now, the first volley from the rim was devastating. 5 outlaws fell immediately, including 2 who'd been manning a makeshift barricade. Colton spun around his face, a mask of shock and rage, as he realized they'd been outmaneuvered. The rim. They're on. The rim. The outlaws scrambled for new cover, but they'd positioned themselves to defend against attack from the entrance, not from above. They were exposed vulnerable and panic began to spread through their ranks. "Keep firing!" Caleb shouted, working the lever of his Winchester as fast as he could. "Don't let them regroup." Meanwhile, 20 miles north, Mercer's pursuit party had caught up with the Comancheros at the old mission. The ancient adobe building, abandoned for decades, squatted in the desert like a tomb. The kidnappers had stopped to rest and water their horses, confident they'd gotten away clean. Clara could see Sarah Bradley tied to a post in the mission courtyard, her face bruised, her dress torn. The sight sent rage flooding through Clara's veins, memories of her own captivity mixing with determination to save this innocent girl. 10 men like Patterson said, Mercer confirmed, studying the scene through field glasses. They've posted 2 sentries, but they're not expecting trouble. "How do we get Sarah out without her getting caught in crossfire?" Clara asked. "We need a distraction," Mercer said, "something to draw them away from her." "I'll do it," Clara said suddenly. "Let me approach alone, pretend to be lost, needing help. While they're focused on me, you can get into position." "Absolutely not. That's insane. It's perfect. They won't see a lone woman as a threat. And once they realize who I am, the woman who escaped from Vaughn, they'll be so focused on capturing me, they won't notice you moving in." "Clara, no. Caleb would never forgive me if—" "Caleb isn't here, and that girl needs our help now." Clara checked her hidden derringer, a gift from Mrs. Carver. "Give me 5 minutes to get their attention, then move in." Before Mercer could stop her, Clara was riding toward the mission, affecting a panicked, lost expression. She let her horse stumble, made herself appear exhausted and desperate. "Help!" she called out. "Please, someone help me!" The sentries straightened, weapons raising, but they relaxed when they saw a lone woman. One of them called back to the others, and soon several Comancheros emerged from the mission. Their leader, Cesar Mendoza, was a lean man with cruel eyes and gold teeth. He approached Clara with a predator's smile. "Senora, you are lost." "My horse spooked," Clara gasped. "I've been riding all night. Please, I need water." Mendoza's eyes narrowed as he studied her face. Then recognition dawned. You're the teacher. The one who was with Vaughn." "I don't know what you mean." "Oh, but I think you do." He grabbed her arm, pulling her from the saddle. "Do you know how much you're worth?" "There are men in Mexico who would pay a fortune for the woman who helped capture Luther Vaughn." "Let me go." "I think not." He turned to his men. "Tie her with the other one. We just doubled our profit today." As they dragged Clara toward the mission, she caught Sarah's terrified eyes and gave her the slightest nod of reassurance. The Comancheros were so excited about their unexpected prize that they'd pulled in their sentries gathering around to leer at their captives, which was exactly when Mercer and his men struck. The first shots took down 3 Comancheros before they even knew they were under attack. Mendoza tried to use Clara as a shield, but she drove her elbow into his stomach and twisted away, pulling the derringer from her boot and shooting him in the knee. The battle was brief but vicious. The Comancheros, caught in the open, tried to fight back but were overwhelmed. Within minutes, 8 were dead and 2 had surrendered. Clara cut Sarah free, holding the sobbing girl as the shooting died away. "It's over," she murmured. "You're safe now." "They killed my father." Sarah wept. "Shot him when he tried to stop them from taking me." "I know, sweetheart, I know." Clara's own eyes were wet as she remembered her terror, her helplessness. But she also remembered her strength, her survival. "But you're alive and you're free, and they'll never hurt you again." Back at Devil's Canyon, the battle had turned into a siege. Colton and his remaining 6 men had found cover in a cluster of boulders, returning fire at both the rim and the canyon entrance. Several of Caleb's men were wounded, though none seriously yet. "We need to end this," Caleb muttered. The sun was climbing higher, and the heat on the exposed rim was becoming brutal. His men couldn't maintain this position much longer. Then he spotted a large boulder balanced precariously on the rim directly above Colton's position. It would only take a little encouragement to send it tumbling down. "Cover me," he told his men. Then worked his way along the ledge to the boulder. Bullets whined past chipping rock fragments that stung his face, but he reached the boulder and put his shoulder against it. It didn't budge. "Help him!" someone shouted, and 2 men joined him, adding their strength to his. The boulder rocked slightly, then settled back. "Again," Caleb grunted. "Together." They heaved muscles, straining, and finally felt the boulder shift. One more push fueled by desperation, and it toppled over the edge. The massive stone fell like God's own hammer, crushing one outlaw instantly and sending the others scrambling. The psychological effect was even greater than the physical, seeing death rain from above broke their remaining will to fight. "We surrender," one of them shouted, throwing down his gun. "Don't shoot! We give up!" But Colton wasn't done. The big man erupted from cover, racing for the horses. He'd almost reached them when Tommy Martinez stepped out from behind a rock, rifle raised. "Stop right there!" the boy commanded, his voice cracking but his aim steady. Colton laughed. "You gonna shoot me, boy?" "If I have to. You ain't got the sand for it." Colton took another step toward the horses. Tommy's rifle cracked once. The bullet took Colton in the shoulder, spinning him around. He tried to draw his pistol with his good arm, but Tommy fired again, this time hitting him in the chest. Jake Colton fell to his knees, staring in disbelief at the 14-year-old who'd ended his reign of terror. "My pa would have wanted that," Tommy said quietly, lowering his rifle as Colton pitched forward into the dust. The remaining outlaws threw down their weapons, hands raised in surrender. Rodriguez's men swarmed up from the canyon entrance, securing the prisoners. The battle was over. Caleb climbed down from the rim, exhaustion making his legs shake. He put a hand on Tommy's shoulder. "You did good, son. Your father would be proud." Tommy nodded, trying to look brave, but Caleb could see the shock setting in. Killing a man, even one who deserved it, was never easy. The boy would carry this moment for the rest of his life. "Mr. Dawson?" One of Rodriguez's men was waving from the outlaws' camp. "You need to see this." They'd found a cave hidden behind canvas and brush, and inside was a fortune in stolen goods, gold from robbed stages, weapons taken from army shipments, and lockboxes full of cash from banks across the territory. But more importantly, they found documents, contracts, correspondence, proof of a conspiracy that went all the way to the territorial capital. "Look at this," Rodriguez said, holding up a letter. "It's from a Senator Maxwell in Phoenix, arranging for Vaughn to eliminate a rival politician. And here's another from a Judge Harriman, not the one arrested, a different one buying stolen cattle for his ranch." "Evidence?" Caleb said with grim satisfaction. "Enough to clean out every corrupt official in the territory." As they cataloged the evidence, a rider appeared at the canyon entrance, one of Mercer's men. "Sheriff says mission secured both women safe. They're heading back to town." Relief flooded through Caleb. Clara was safe. They'd won on both fronts. The journey back to Bitter Creek was triumphant. The captured outlaws walked with their hands tied their horses, led by militia members. The wagon carrying the recovered loot was heavily guarded, and word of their victory spread like wildfire across the desert. By the time they reached town, it seemed like the entire population had turned out to greet them. Women wept with relief, men cheered, and children ran alongside the column, treating the militia like conquering heroes. Clara stood on the hotel porch with Sarah Bradley, both of them cleaned up, but still showing signs of their ordeal. When she saw Caleb, Clara ran down the steps and threw herself into his arms, not caring who saw. "You did it," she breathed against his chest. "You actually did it." "We did it," he corrected, holding her tight. "All of us together." Mercer addressed the crowd from the hotel steps, his voice carrying across the square. "Citizens of Bitter Creek, today, we've proven that we don't need to live in fear. The Comancheros are broken. Colton's gang is finished, and we have enough evidence to ensure that the corruption that allowed them to flourish will be rooted out." The crowd erupted in celebration, but Mercer held up his hand for silence. "But our work isn't done. We need to remain vigilant to build proper law and order that will last. I'm reinstating myself as sheriff with the town council's approval, and I'm deputizing 10 men to maintain the peace." "What about the federal marshals?" someone called out. "They're on their way," Mercer replied. "A full contingent along with a judge who isn't bought and paid for. The trials will be fair and justice will be served." That evening, as the town celebrated in the saloon and the streets, Caleb found himself back at his uncle's ranch with Clara. They stood on the porch looking out at the desert painted purple and gold by the setting sun. "It's over," Clara said, though she sounded like she didn't quite believe it. "This part is," Caleb agreed, "but there's still the trials and rebuilding and making sure something like this never happens again." I mean for me, she clarified. The running the fear. For the first time since they took me, I feel like I can breathe. What will you do now? You're free to go anywhere, be anything. Clara was quiet for a moment. Sarah Bradley asked me to help her. She wants to open a school, a real one, for all the children in the valley. She says her father left her enough money to build it. That's a fine idea. She wants to build it here on your land if you'll allow it. Says it's central to all the ranches, and after what happened here, it represents hope triumphing over fear. Caleb smiled. I think my uncle would have loved that. Yes, of course. And she wants me to be the teacher, Clara continued, to stay here permanently. And what do you want? She turned to face him fully. I want to stop running. I want to build something good from all this pain. And she hesitated, then forged ahead. I want to do it with you if you'll have me. Caleb's heart hammered in his chest. Clara, you don't owe me anything. What I did isn't about debt or gratitude, she interrupted. Caleb, when I was in that mission when Mendoza grabbed me, do you know what I thought about? Not escape, not survival, but you. How I needed to get back to you. How I hadn't told you that somewhere between that first night when you found me and now I fell in love with you. The words hung in the air between them as powerful as any gunshot. Caleb reached out, cupping her face gently in his calloused hands. Clara, You don't have to say it back, she said quickly. I know it's fast and there's so much to do, and he kissed her, cutting off her words. It was gentle at first, tentative, as if they were both afraid the other might bolt. Then Clara's arms went around his neck, and the kiss deepened, becoming something that held promises of a future neither had dared imagine a week ago. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. I love you too, have since you stood in that doorway with a knife ready to fight the whole world if necessary. Clara laughed, the sound mixing with tears she didn't try to hide. We're quite a pair, aren't we? A drifter and a runaway teacher. A rancher and a schoolmarm, Caleb corrected. Building something new from the ashes of the old. Together. As if to underscore the moment, riders appeared on the horizon. Federal marshals, a full company of them, come to restore order and collect the evidence that would cleanse the territory of corruption. Their arrival meant safety, justice, and a new beginning for Bitter Creek. But for Caleb and Clara, standing together on the porch of a ranch that would soon echo with children's laughter from the school they'd build, it meant something more. It meant home. That night, as the town celebrated and the marshals took custody of the prisoners, Caleb and Clara sat by the fire in the ranch house planning their future. They talked about the school, about rebuilding the ranch properly, about the life they'd create together. The journal that had helped bring down a criminal empire lay on the table, its purpose served. Your uncle started something important, Clara said, tracing her finger along the journal's worn cover. He'd be proud of how you finished it. It's not finished yet, Caleb said. There's still the trials and making sure the territory stays clean. But the hardest part is done. We faced them down and won. A knock at the door interrupted them. It was Mrs. Carver, accompanied by Mercer and Dr. Campbell. They entered with solemn expressions that immediately put Caleb on alert. What is it he asked. We've been going through the documents from Colton's camp, Mercer said. We found something you need to see. He handed Caleb a letter yellowed with age, but still legible. Caleb recognized his uncle's handwriting immediately. My dear nephew, he read aloud. If you're reading this, then my fight has ended and yours has begun. I've left you more than just land, Caleb. I've left you a purpose. The ranch sits on the richest silver vein in the territory, a secret I've kept to prevent it from falling into the wrong hands. Use this wealth wisely to build schools to support law and order, to make the territory a place where families can thrive without fear. Trust John Mercer, Elizabeth Carver, and Samuel Rodriguez. They've been my silent partners in fighting the corruption that plagues our land. And if you found Clara Whitmore, the teacher from Boston, protect her. I arranged for her to come here to teach, but Vaughn's men took her stage before she could arrive safely. She's the key to the future I envisioned education breaking the cycle of violence and ignorance. My body may be gone, but my spirit lives on in the work you'll do. Make me proud, nephew. Your loving Uncle Tom. The room was silent as Caleb finished reading. Clara's hand found his, squeezing tight. He knew, she whispered. Somehow he knew. The silver vein is real, Mrs. Carver confirmed. Tom showed me the assay reports. It's worth millions properly mined. That's why Vaughn wanted the land so badly, Mercer added. He suspected something valuable was here but could never prove it. Caleb looked at the letter again, his uncle's words blurring through unexpected tears. He planned all of this. Even from beyond the grave, he was fighting for justice. And he chose his champion well, Dr. Campbell said. You've honored his memory and his vision. We all have, Caleb said, looking around the room at these people who'd risked everything to stand against tyranny. This victory belongs to all of us. Mrs. Carver smiled. Then let's make sure it lasts. With the silver mine's wealth, we can build not just one school, but several. We can bring in proper doctors, establish real banks, maybe even petition for a railroad spur. Turn Bitter Creek into a beacon of civilization in the wilderness, Mercer agreed. They talked late into the night, planning a future that would have seemed impossible just days ago. The silver mine would be operated as a collective trust, its profits funding public works and education. The ranch would become the heart of a new community, one built on justice and opportunity rather than fear and exploitation. As their guests finally departed, Caleb and Clara stood once more on the porch, looking out at the star-filled sky. Tomorrow would bring federal investigators, lawyers, and the beginning of trials that would reshape the territory's power structure. But tonight, there was peace. Your uncle would be proud, Clara said softly. I think he is, Caleb replied, pulling her close. Somewhere, somehow, I think he knows. A shooting star streaked across the sky, and Clara made a wish not for safety or wealth or even happiness, but for the strength to build the future Tom Dawson had envisioned. Beside her, Caleb made the same wish. The next morning brought chaos disguised as order. Federal marshals swarmed the ranch, documenting evidence, taking statements, and preparing for what promised to be the territory's most significant trial. Marshal Foster, who'd arrived to take charge, set up his headquarters in the main house, while Caleb and Clara worked to accommodate the sudden influx of lawmen. We need your testimony first, Miss Whitmore. Foster said, his manner professional but not unkind. Everything you witnessed, everything they did, I know it won't be easy. Clara sat straight-backed in her chair, Caleb beside her for support. I understand, Marshal. When do we leave for Tucson? That's just it, Foster said, looking troubled. We've received word that Judge Harriman, the one we arrested, has been released on bail. His lawyers are claiming the evidence was obtained illegally. And there's worse news. How could it be worse? Caleb demanded. Someone's been killing witnesses. 3 people who were set to testify against the corruption ring have died in the past 2 days. Made to look like accidents, but we know better. Foster met their eyes grimly. They're trying to collapse the case before it reaches trial. Clara's hand found Caleb's. They're coming for us. We'll protect you, Foster assured them. I'm posting guards and... A commotion outside interrupted him. Through the window, they could see a group of riders approaching well-dressed men who looked like they'd be more at home in a courthouse than on the desert trail. At their head rode a man Caleb recognized from newspaper sketches. Senator James Maxwell, one of the most powerful men in the territory. Speak of the devil, Foster muttered. Maxwell dismounted with practiced ease, his expensive suit somehow remaining pristine despite the dust. He was flanked by 4 men who moved like hired guns despite their civilized appearance. When he entered the house without knocking, his smile was as cold as a winter grave. Marshal Foster, he said pleasantly. Mr. Dawson, and the famous Miss Whitmore. What an interesting gathering. Senator, Foster said carefully, what brings you here? Why concern for justice, of course. Maxwell's smile widened. I've come to ensure that these proceedings are handled properly. There have been complaints about overzealous law enforcement violations of due process. We can't have federal marshals running roughshod over territorial law. We're following every legal requirement, Foster said. Are you? Because I have a writ here from Judge Patterson? Judge Harriman's replacement ordering the release of all prisoners pending a review of the evidence. Maxwell produced a document with a flourish. It seems there are questions about the legitimacy of certain documents found at the scene. Those documents are legitimate, Caleb said, stepping forward. My uncle collected them over months. Your deceased uncle who cannot testify to their authenticity, Maxwell pointed out. And the word of a traumatized woman and a nephew with a clear financial interest in the property hardly constitutes reliable testimony. Clara stood slowly, her green eyes blazing. Are you calling me a liar, Senator? I'm suggesting that memory can be unreliable, especially after trauma. Perhaps you misunderstood what you saw and heard. Perhaps these men weren't the monsters you've painted them to be. They murdered 13 people that we know of, Foster interjected. We have bodies, Senator. Killed in shootouts that you provoked, Maxwell countered. Some might call it murder under color of law. The threat hung in the air like smoke from a distant fire. Maxwell was turning everything around, making the lawmen and victims into the criminals. It was a masterful legal manipulation, and Caleb could see Foster struggling to counter it. What do you want? Caleb asked bluntly. Maxwell's mask slipped slightly, revealing the predator beneath. I want this witch hunt to end. These trials will tear the territory apart, destroy good men's reputations over the words of outlaws and fallen women. The slur against Clara was deliberate, calculated to provoke. Caleb's hand moved toward his gun, but Clara caught his wrist. I was a teacher, she said quietly. I came here to educate children. Your associates turned me into what you call a fallen woman. But I survived Senator, and I remember everything, every name, every face, every transaction I overheard. Would you like me to share what I know about your involvement? Maxwell's face darkened. You're playing a dangerous game, Miss Whitmore. No, Senator, the game is over. You just haven't realized it yet. Before Maxwell could respond, riders appeared on the horizon, lots of them. At first, Caleb feared it was more of Maxwell's men, but then he recognized the lead rider, Mrs. Carver, and behind her what looked like half the town of Bitter Creek. They rode up to the ranch in a cloud of dust, armed and determined. Sam Rodriguez dismounted first, his weathered face set in hard lines. We heard the senator was paying a visit, he said. Thought he might need reminding that the people of this territory have a voice too. This is intimidation, Maxwell sputtered. No, Mrs. Carver said, dismounting gracefully. This is community. These are the people your criminal associates terrorized, the families who lost fathers, brothers, daughters. They have a right to see justice done. More riders were arriving, ranchers, townspeople, even some Apache scouts who'd suffered from the gang's gun running. Within minutes, over 100 people surrounded the ranch house, silent, but present, their very existence a rebuke to Maxwell's attempts at legal manipulation. Doctor. Campbell pushed through the crowd, and with him was someone unexpected, a young woman in an expensive traveling dress, her face pale but determined. Father, she said, and Maxwell went rigid. Catherine, what are you doing here? Making things right, Catherine Maxwell replied. She turned to Marshal Foster. I have documents my father doesn't know I possess. Correspondence between him and Luther Vaughn records of bribes, even plans to eliminate federal investigators. You don't know what you're doing, Maxwell said, his voice strained. I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm choosing justice over family loyalty. Mother would have wanted this. She handed Foster a leather portfolio. Everything you need is here. Maxwell lunged for the documents, but his own guard stepped back, unwilling to assault his daughter in front of 100 witnesses. Foster's men quickly restrained the senator, who struggled futilely against their grip. You've killed us all, Maxwell told his daughter. They won't let this stand. The powers behind this go higher than you know. Then we'll fight them too, Caleb said. As high as we need to go. Foster examined the documents quickly, his eyes widening. Senator James Maxwell, you're under arrest for conspiracy, corruption, and murder for hire. As they led Maxwell away, his daughter remained behind. She looked lost adrift until Clara approached her. That was incredibly brave, Clara said softly. It was necessary, Catherine replied, her voice hollow. I've known for years what my father was, but I was too cowardly to act. When I heard about you, what you survived, what you're fighting for, I couldn't stay silent anymore. You'll need protection, Foster said. They'll come after you for this. Then she'll stay here, Clara said, looking to Caleb for confirmation. He nodded immediately. The ranch is becoming quite the sanctuary, he observed. Good things grow in sanctuaries, Clara replied. Over the next 3 days, the ranch transformed into a fortress of justice. Foster's men interviewed witnesses, cataloged evidence, and prepared for the trials that would now definitely proceed. Catherine Maxwell's documents had broken the case wide open, implicating dozens of officials throughout the territory. But the enemy wasn't finished. On the third night, they struck. Clara woke to the smell of smoke. She shook Caleb awake, and they rushed outside to find the barn ablaze. Men on horseback were shooting at anyone who tried to fight the fire, driving them back into cover. "They're trying to destroy the evidence," Foster shouted. The barn was where they'd stored many of the recovered documents. "No," Caleb realized. "It's a distraction." He was right. While everyone focused on the barn, another group of attackers breached the house from the back. They were after the witnesses Clara Catherine and the others whose testimony could convict powerful men. The battle that followed was vicious and chaotic. In the flickering light of the burning barn, friend and foe were hard to distinguish. Clara found herself separated from Caleb, backing through the house with Catherine behind her as masked men advanced. "There they are," one shouted. "Take them alive, they're worth more that way." Clara fired her rifle, dropping one attacker, but there were too many. They were being herded toward the back door where more men waited. This had been carefully planned. Then Tommy Martinez appeared from nowhere, the boy moving through the shadows like a ghost. He'd learned well from his recent experiences. His rifle spoke twice, clearing a path for Clara and Catherine to reach the kitchen where they could barricade themselves. "Where's Caleb?" Clara demanded. "Fighting at the front," Tommy gasped. "There's too many of them, Miss Clara. We need help." As if in answer to his words, a bugle sounded in the distance. Cavalry, real military cavalry, came thundering out of the darkness. Foster had called for army support days ago, and they'd arrived just in time. The attackers scattered before the disciplined military charge. Those who tried to fight were cut down quickly. Within minutes, the battle was over, though the barn was a total loss. Caleb found Clara in the kitchen, still holding her rifle, Catherine and Tommy beside her. He pulled her into his arms, not caring who saw. "I thought I'd lost you," he murmured into her hair. "Never," she replied fiercely. "We're not done fighting yet." The cavalry captain, a weathered veteran named Harrison, surveyed the damage with disgust. "Marshal Foster requested support, but I didn't expect to find a war zone. How deep does this corruption go?" "All the way to Washington, possibly," Foster admitted. "We've uncovered evidence of a syndicate that's been operating throughout the Western territories. Gun running, human trafficking, land theft through murder, it's bigger than we imagined." "Then we'd better end it properly," Harrison said. "I'm establishing martial law in this county until the trials are complete. Anyone who threatens witnesses will face military justice." The trials began 2 weeks later, not in Tucson as originally planned, but right in Bitter Creek. The Army had transformed the town into a secure compound with soldiers on every corner and sharpshooters on the roofs. A federal judge from back east, someone with no connections to territorial politics, presided over the proceedings. Clara's testimony took 3 days. She spoke clearly and without emotion, detailing everything she'd witnessed and experienced. When Vaughn's lawyer tried to discredit her, suggesting she was confused or seeking revenge, she remained calm. "I'm not confused," she said, "and I don't want revenge. I want justice, not just for myself, but for all the women who didn't survive, for all the families destroyed by these men's greed." Catherine Maxwell's testimony was equally damaging, providing documentation that proved the conspiracy reached into the highest levels of government. Her father sat in chains watching his daughter destroy everything he'd built on a foundation of blood and crime. Caleb testified about his uncle's murder, presenting Tom Dawson's journal as evidence. The meticulous records combined with the other evidence painted a picture of systematic criminality that shocked even hardened frontier folk. The verdicts came down like hammer blows. Luther Vaughn, death by hanging. Senator Maxwell, life in federal prison. Judge Harriman, 20 years hard labor. Down the line it went justice measured out to men who'd thought themselves above the law. But the most dramatic moment came when a surprise witness appeared, Maggie, the Irish girl Clara had helped rescue. She'd been gathering her courage, and now she stood before the court with something crucial. "I worked in Senator Maxwell's house before they took me," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I saw things, heard things. There's a hidden safe in his study. behind the portrait of his wife. Everything's there, names of everyone involved, even those not caught yet. Federal marshals immediately rode to search Maxwell's mansion. They found the safe exactly where Maggie had said, and inside was a treasure trove of incriminating evidence. The conspiracy was even larger than they'd thought, reaching into New Mexico, California, and Nevada. "This is going to take years to fully prosecute," Foster told Caleb and Clara that evening, "but we've broken its back. The territory is free." As the trials concluded and the guilty were led away to their fates, Bitter Creek began to transform. With the silver mine now operating legally, money flowed into the community. The school Clara and Sarah had planned became reality, a beautiful building with real glass windows and books from Boston. On the day the school opened, Clara stood before her students, children of all ages, eager to learn to be part of something better than the violence that had defined their territory. Sarah Bradley assisted her, having found purpose in helping others learn despite her own tragedy. "Education is freedom," Clara told her students. "With knowledge, you can build a better world than the one we inherited." Caleb watched from the doorway, pride swelling in his chest. His uncle's dream was becoming reality, but it was Clara who gave it life and meaning. That evening, as they walked together through the ranch that was now truly beginning to prosper, Clara stopped suddenly. "What is it?" Caleb asked. "I just realized something," she said. "It's been exactly 2 months since you found me hiding in your uncle's house. Feels like a lifetime." In a way it was. That woman hiding in the dark, she's gone. I'm someone new now, someone stronger. "You were always strong," Caleb said. "You just needed the chance to show it." She turned to face him fully. "Caleb Dawson, you saved my life in more ways than one. You gave me purpose, hope, a home, and I want to spend the rest of my life showing you how grateful I am." "Clara, you don't owe me." "I'm not talking about owing," she interrupted. "I'm talking about choosing. I choose you, Caleb. Today, tomorrow, always, if you'll have me." Caleb's answer was to drop to one knee right there in the desert dust. "Clara Whitmore, you've already made me the richest man in the territory, and I'm not talking about the silver mine. Will you marry me?" "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at once. "Yes, of course, yes." They were married a month later with the whole town in attendance. Mrs. Carver served as matron of honor, while John Mercer stood as best man. Tommy Martinez carried the rings, his chest puffed with pride at the responsibility. Even Catherine Maxwell attended, having found her own peace in helping rebuild what her father had tried to destroy. Foster performed the ceremony, having gotten himself ordained for the occasion. "These two people," he said, "represent everything good about the territory, courage, justice, and the belief that love can flourish even in the harshest ground." As Caleb kissed his bride, the crowd erupted in celebration. The woman who'd arrived as a captive had become a leader. The drifter who'd come to claim an inheritance had found his purpose. Together they'd helped transform a lawless territory into a place where families could thrive. But the story wasn't quite over. As the celebration continued into the evening, a rider approached a young Apache scout who'd been watching the northern borders. "Riders coming," he reported to Mercer. "Maybe 30, armed." The celebration stopped, hands moving to weapons. Had another gang come to test them? But as the riders came into view, Caleb started laughing. At their head rode a familiar figure, Deputy U.S. Marshal Samuel Creed, whom Caleb had served with in the cavalry years before. "Heard you were having a party," Creed called out. "Thought we'd crash it. We're the new permanent federal presence in the territory. Seems Washington finally decided this place is worth protecting." "Sam, you old dog," Caleb said, clasping his friend's hand. "Perfect timing. You're just in time for the wedding feast." "Wedding?" Creed looked at Clara in her white dress, then back at Caleb. "You actually settled down. The man who swore he'd never be tied to one place." "I found something worth staying for," Caleb replied, his arm around Clara's waist. "Several something," Clara added, gesturing to the town, the school, the community they'd helped build. As the federal marshals joined the celebration, bringing news from the outside world and promises of continued protection, Clara found a moment of quiet with her new husband. "No regrets?" she asked. "Only one," Caleb said. "I wish my uncle could see this. He started all of it." He can, Clara said, pointing to the school where Tom Dawson's portrait hung in a place of honor. Every child who learns to read, every family that lives without fear, every bit of justice done, that's his legacy living on. The party continued late into the night with music and dancing and the kind of joy that comes from surviving darkness and finding light. The Dawson Ranch, once abandoned and haunted by violence, now rang with laughter and hope. But even in celebration, they remained watchful. The territory was safer, but not yet fully tamed. There would be other challenges, other fights. The difference now was that they wouldn't face them alone. They had each other, they had their community, and they had the law on their side. As the evening wound down, Caleb and Clara stood on their porch, the same porch, where they'd first planned their desperate defense against Vaughn's men. So much had changed, yet the desert looked the same, vast and unforgiving, but somehow beautiful in its harsh honesty. "What are you thinking about?" Clara asked. "The future," Caleb replied. "The children you'll teach the town will help build the life we'll create together. It won't be easy. There are still people out there who resent what we've done." "Let them come," Caleb said. "We've faced worse and won." A shooting star crossed the sky, and this time Clara didn't make a wish. She had everything she wanted: freedom, purpose, love, and a home. The frightened woman hiding in an abandoned house was gone, replaced by someone who'd helped change the course of a territory's history. "Mrs. Dawson," Caleb said, testing out the new title. "How does it feel?" "Like coming home," she replied. "Like the end of one story and the beginning of another." Inside the house, their guests were preparing to leave, but the warmth of community lingered. Tommy Martinez had fallen asleep in a chair, exhausted from the excitement. Catherine Maxwell was deep in conversation with Dr. Campbell about establishing a hospital with the mine's proceeds. Sarah Bradley was planning next term's curriculum with 2 new teachers who'd arrived from the East. Life was moving forward, building on the foundation of justice they'd fought so hard to establish. The terror that had gripped the territory was broken, replaced by hope and determination. But Caleb knew that vigilance was still necessary. In his pocket was a letter from Foster warning of other criminal organizations watching to see if the territory would remain strong or weaken over time. The fight for justice was never truly over. It just took different forms. "Whatever comes next," Clara said, reading his thoughts, as she often did now, "we'll face it together." "Together," he agreed, and they went inside to join their friends and begin their new life. The lamp in the window burned bright, a beacon in the darkness that said this place was protected, valued, loved. The Dawson Ranch had become more than just land. It had become a symbol of what determined people could accomplish when they stood together against evil. 6 months had passed since the wedding, and the morning sun found Clara teaching in the schoolhouse while Caleb supervised the construction of new buildings funded by the silver mine. The ranch had become a small community unto itself, with families of workers living in newly built cottages, children playing in the dusty streets, and the constant sound of progress echoing across the desert. Clara was in the middle of a geography lesson when she noticed one of her students, Maria Rodriguez, staring out the window with fear in her eyes. Following the girl's gaze, Clara saw riders approaching, not the usual ranch hands or townspeople, but strangers well-armed and moving with military precision. "Children, quiet reading time," Clara said calmly, though her hand moved to the pistol she now always kept in her desk drawer. "Maria, go fetch Mr. Dawson. Tell him we have visitors." The girl slipped out the back door while Clara moved to the front of the classroom, watching the riders dismount. Their leader was a woman which surprised Clara. She was perhaps 40, with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. Her clothes were practical but well-made, and she wore her guns like someone who knew how to use them. "Can I help you?" Clara called from the doorway. The woman approached slowly, hands visible but ready. "I'm looking for Clara Dawson, formerly Clara Whitmore." "I'm Clara Dawson." "My name is Margaret Shaw. I represent certain interests back east who have been following the trials here with great interest." She paused, studying Clara's face. "I believe we have mutual concerns about the trafficking of women in the territories." Before Clara could respond, Caleb arrived with several armed ranch hands. He positioned himself slightly in front of Clara, protective but not overtly threatening. Mrs. Shaw, he said. I know who you are. You run the Pinkerton office in Denver. Margaret Shaw smiled slightly. Former Pinkerton. I've started my own agency now, one that specializes in certain kinds of cases, the kind the regular law won't touch. What do you want? Caleb asked bluntly. Your help. There's a situation developing that threatens to undo everything you've accomplished here. May we speak privately? Clara and Caleb exchanged glances. The Pinkertons had a mixed reputation in the territories, sometimes heroes, sometimes thugs for hire. But Margaret Shaw's reputation was different. She was known for taking cases involving crimes against women and children, often pro bono. The schoolhouse continues in an hour, Clara told her students. Practice your letters until I return. They convened in the ranch house where Margaret Shaw laid out her purpose with military efficiency. The trials here have scared the criminal syndicates, but they haven't destroyed them. They're reorganizing, becoming more careful. And they're planning something that will make what happened here look like a church picnic. What kind of something? Caleb demanded. A gathering. Every major criminal leader west of the Mississippi is meeting in 3 days at Perdition Falls. They're going to divide up the territories, establish new routes for trafficking, and most importantly, they're planning to eliminate everyone who testified in the Bitter Creek trials. Clara's blood went cold. Everyone? You, your husband, Catherine Maxwell, the other women who testified, even young Tommy Martinez. They have a list. They're calling it The Reckoning. How do you know this? Caleb asked suspiciously. Margaret pulled out a leather folder filled with documents. I have someone on the inside. A woman who's been posing as merchandise for 6 months gathering intelligence. She's risked everything to get this information out. Clara studied the documents, maps, names, planned routes for moving kidnapped women. The scale was staggering. This is an army they're building. Exactly. Which is why I need your help. The federal marshals are spread too thin. The army says it's not their jurisdiction, and local law enforcement is either bought or scared. But you've built something here, a community that fights back. I need that kind of support. You want us to attack Perdition Falls? Caleb asked incredulously. That's a fortified town in the middle of nowhere. It would be suicide. Not attack us, Margaret corrected. Infiltrate. My operative has arranged for an opportunity. There's going to be an auction, women taken from all over the territories. The buyers will be the criminal leaders. If we can get inside during the auction, we can identify all of them at once, Clara finished. Document who they are, what they're planning. And then, Caleb pressed. Then we bring hell down on them, Margaret said simply. I have promises from the governor. If we can provide proof of this gathering, he'll declare martial law and send in the cavalry. But we need that proof first. Clara stood and walked to the window looking out at the school where her students were practicing their letters. Those children represented the future they were trying to build. If the criminals reorganized, that future would die. I'll do it, she said quietly. Absolutely not, Caleb said immediately. Clara, you can't. I can, and I will. She turned to face him. I know how these men think, how they operate. I can blend in with the other women, gather information from the inside. It's too dangerous. Everything we've done has been dangerous, but this, Caleb, if we don't stop this now, we'll be looking over our shoulders for the rest of our lives. Our children will inherit our fear. The mention of children made Caleb pause. Clara hadn't told him yet, but she'd suspected for weeks now. Doctor. Campbell had confirmed it just yesterday. She was carrying their child. The timing couldn't be worse, but perhaps that made it even more important to act now before she was unable to. If you go, I go, Caleb said firmly. We'll need more than just the two of you, Margaret said. This requires a team, people who can play different roles, who won't be recognized. I know someone, Clara said suddenly. Catherine Maxwell. She knows that world, knows how those men think, and she has her own reasons for wanting them stopped. The senator's daughter. Can she be trusted? With my life, Clara said firmly. She gave up everything to testify. This is her chance to fully break free from her father's legacy. They spent the rest of the day planning. Margaret's operative, a woman named Rose, who'd been living as a captive for months while gathering intelligence, would help them get inside. Caleb and several men would pose as buyers, while Clara and Catherine would infiltrate with the women being sold. "The auction is in 3 days," Margaret said. "We need to leave tomorrow to get there in time." That night, Clara finally told Caleb about the baby. They were lying in bed, the house quiet around them, when she took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "There's something you should know," she said softly. "Something that makes this both more important and more terrifying." Understanding dawned in his eyes. We're... Yes. Dr. Campbell thinks about 6 weeks along." Caleb pulled her close, his emotions warring between joy and fear. "Then you can't go. It's too dangerous." "That's exactly why I have to go. I won't bring a child into a world where these monsters still operate. I want our son or daughter to grow up free, truly free." "Clara, I was pregnant once before," she said quietly, and Caleb went still. She'd never spoken of this before they took me. "I lost it during the first week of captivity from the beatings and the stress. They never knew, and I never told anyone until now." "Oh, Clara," his arms tightened around her. "I won't let fear rule my life anymore, and I won't let these men threaten another generation. We end this now while we still can." The next morning, their team assembled. Besides Caleb and Clara, there was Catherine Maxwell, who'd become harder and more determined in the months since her father's arrest, and Tommy Martinez, who, despite his youth, had proven himself invaluable. Sam Rodriguez sent 3 of his best vaqueros men who could handle themselves in a fight. Dr. Campbell insisted on coming too, knowing they'd need medical help for the women they hoped to rescue. Margaret Shaw had her own team of 4 hardened operatives, all women who'd escaped from trafficking situations, and now worked to destroy the networks that had enslaved them. Together, they made a formidable, if unconventional, force. The ride to Perdition Falls took 2 days through some of the roughest country in the territory. The town itself was built in a box canyon with only one road in and out, a perfect trap if things went wrong. As they made camp 5 miles outside town, Margaret's operative, Rose, slipped into their camp like a ghost. She was younger than Clara had expected, maybe 22, with the kind of beauty that made her perfect bait for the traffickers. But her eyes were old, hardened by what she'd seen and done. "They're all here," Rose reported. "Every major player west of the Mississippi. Tomorrow night's auction is supposed to be the biggest ever. 40 women from as far away as Oregon." 40, Clara breathed. "Where are they keeping them?" "An old mission at the center of town, heavily guarded. The buyers have been arriving all day, setting up in the hotel and saloons." Rose pulled out a hand-drawn map. "I've marked where the major players are staying, but there's a problem." "What kind of problem?" Caleb asked. "Someone named Harlan Vance arrived this morning. He wasn't expected. Clara, he knows you. He was one of Vaughn's men who got away. If he sees you..." Clara's jaw tightened. She remembered Vance, a cruel man who'd taken particular pleasure in tormenting the captive women. "Then I'll have to make sure he doesn't see me. Or we make sure he can't tell anyone if he does," Catherine said coldly. The months since her father's arrest had changed her from a sheltered society woman into someone harder, more pragmatic. They spent the rest of the day preparing. The men would enter town first, establishing themselves as buyers with plenty of gold. Then Clara, Catherine, and 2 of Margaret's operatives would slip in with the next group of merchandise that Rose had arranged to intercept. "Remember," Margaret said, "we need evidence. Names, faces, documents, if possible. The governor won't act without proof that can stand up in court." "What about the women already there?" Clara asked. "We can't just leave them." "We won't," Margaret promised. "But we have to be smart about this. If we move too soon, the leaders will scatter and we'll lose our chance." That night, Caleb held Clara close, neither of them sleeping. "Promise me something," he whispered. "What?" "If things go bad, you run. Don't try to be a hero. Think of the baby." "I promise to be careful," she said, which wasn't quite the same thing. The next morning, Caleb and the other men rode into Perdition Falls, openly playing their roles as wealthy buyers. Caleb had adopted a slight southern accent and the manner of a plantation owner looking to staff his household. The act made his skin crawl, but it got him inside. The town was a cesspool of humanity's worst. Men who'd made fortunes from human misery walked the streets openly, comparing notes on their crimes like businessmen discussing trade routes. Caleb recognized several faces from wanted posters. Men who should have been hanging from gallows instead of drinking whiskey in broad daylight. He established himself in the saloon, making sure to flash his gold and speak loudly about his needs for quality merchandise. Within an hour, he'd been approached by 3 different sellers, each promising him the best selection at that night's auction. Meanwhile, Clara and the others had intercepted a wagon bringing 3 kidnapped women from New Mexico. They'd freed the women, sending them to safety with Dr. Campbell, and taken their places. The guards, drunk and careless, never noticed the substitution. As the wagon rolled into Perdition Falls, Clara kept her head down, playing the part of a broken captive. Catherine was beside her, similarly disguised. They were herded into the mission with the other women, and Clara's heart broke at what she saw. 43 women, ages ranging from 14 to 30, all showing signs of abuse and starvation. Some had the empty eyes of those who'd given up hope. Others still showed flickers of defiance, quickly suppressed by the guards' casual brutality. "New arrivals go in the back," a guard ordered, shoving Clara and Catherine toward a cage-like cell. "Auction starts at sunset. Make yourselves pretty if you want to fetch good prices. The ugly ones go to the mining camps." Once locked in, Clara immediately began assessing their situation. The mission was old but solid, with barred windows and only 2 visible exits, both heavily guarded. But Rose had mentioned something about tunnels used during the Apache Wars. "Clara," a weak voice called from the neighboring cell. Clara turned and gasped. It was Maggie, the Irish girl they'd rescued months ago. She'd been recaptured. "Maggie, how—" "They took me from Tucson 2 weeks ago. I thought I was safe, but—" She started crying. "They said tonight I'm going to someone special, someone who paid extra for a girl who'd testified." Clara's blood ran cold. This was about revenge as much as profit. These men were sending a message to anyone who'd stood against them. "We're getting you out," Clara whispered fiercely. "All of you." "How?" "There's too many guards. Trust me." As the sun began to set, the guards came to prepare the women for auction. Clara and Catherine allowed themselves to be cleaned up and dressed in revealing gowns that made Clara's skin crawl. But it also allowed them to hide weapons, small knives in their boots, a derringer tucked into Catherine's corset. The auction hall was packed with men all wearing masks to hide their identities. But Clara recognized many by their builds, their voices, their mannerisms. She memorized everything, knowing that her testimony might be the only evidence they'd get. Then she saw him. Harlan Vance, standing near the stage, his eyes scanning the women being brought out. When his gaze fell on Clara, recognition flared immediately. "Well, well," he said, approaching. "Clara Whitmore. Or should I say, Clara Dawson now. What an unexpected pleasure." Clara's mind raced. If she denied it, he'd know she was lying. If she admitted it— "Hello, Harlan," she said calmly. "I wondered if you'd be here." His eyes narrowed. "You're not here as merchandise. You're here as—" Understanding dawned. "It's a trap. You're all law." He started to shout a warning, but Catherine moved faster than Clara would have thought possible. The derringer appeared in her hand and fired once the small pop lost in the noise of the crowd. Vance staggered, looking down at the spreading red stain on his chest, then collapsed. "Heart attack," Catherine announced loudly. "Someone help this man." In the confusion that followed, Clara saw their opportunity. She grabbed Maggie and several other women, heading for the side door she'd noticed earlier. But they were cut off by guards who'd heard the commotion. That's when Caleb and the others struck. They'd been waiting for any sign of trouble, and Vance's collapse was it. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions as the lawmen revealed themselves. Federal marshals, everyone down. The auction hall became a battlefield. The criminal leaders, realizing they'd been trapped, fought desperately to escape. But Margaret Shaw's people had blocked the exits, and the cavalry, alerted by a rider sent as soon as the team had confirmed the gathering, was already surrounding the town. Clara found herself in the middle of the chaos, trying to protect the kidnapped women while fighting off guards and would-be escapees. She saw Tommy Martinez fighting like a man 3 times his age, holding a doorway against multiple attackers. She saw Dr. Campbell dragging wounded women to safety, while bullets flew overhead, and she saw Caleb, magnificent in his fury, cutting through the criminals like an avenging angel. He was fighting toward her, always toward her, making sure she was safe. Then something went wrong. A lantern was knocked over in the struggle, and fire began spreading through the old wooden structure. The dried timber of the mission caught, immediately turning the auction hall into an inferno. "Everyone out!" Margaret Shaw shouted. "The building's coming down!" Clara grabbed as many women as she could, forming a human chain to get them through the smoke and flames. The heat was overwhelming, the smoke choking, but she kept moving, kept pulling others to safety. She'd gotten 30 women out when she realized Maggie was missing. Without thinking, she plunged back into the burning building. "Clara, no!" Caleb's voice behind her, but she was already inside. She found Maggie trapped under a fallen beam leg, clearly broken. Clara tried to lift it, but didn't have the strength. Then Caleb was there, adding his strength to hers, and together they freed the girl. Caleb carried Maggie while Clara led them through the smoke, following her memory of the building's layout. They burst out of the mission just as the roof collapsed, sending sparks and embers into the night sky. Clara fell to her knees, coughing, her lungs burning. Caleb set Maggie down gently, then pulled Clara into his arms. "You promised to be careful," he said roughly. "I was. I took you with me." Despite everything, he laughed. The aftermath was swift and decisive. With the cavalry in control, the surviving criminals were arrested en masse. 23 major trafficking leaders were captured, along with enough evidence to dismantle their entire network. The freed women were taken to safety, many reuniting with families who'd thought them lost forever. But the cost had been high. 3 of Margaret's operatives had died in the fighting. Several of the kidnapped women had been killed in the crossfire. And Rose, the brave woman who'd spent months undercover, had been executed by one of the leaders when he'd realized she was a spy. At Rose's burial the next day, Margaret Shaw stood over the grave with tears on her face, the first emotion Clara had seen her show. "She knew the risks," Margaret said quietly. "We all do, but knowing doesn't make it easier." "Will it ever end?" Clara asked. "The trafficking, the violence?" "Probably not entirely. There's too much money in it. Too many men willing to profit from misery. But we've dealt them a blow they won't recover from quickly. The territories will be safer for a while." "A while?" Claire repeated, her hand moving unconsciously to her stomach. Margaret noticed the gesture and smiled slightly. "Congratulations. When spring, Dr. Campbell thinks. A new generation for a new territory. That's worth fighting for." The ride back to Bitter Creek was subdued despite their victory. Too many had died, too much had been lost. But as they approached the ranch and Clara saw her school, her students running out to greet them, she felt hope returning. Catherine Maxwell had decided to stay in Perdition Falls, working with Margaret Shaw to help the rescued women rebuild their lives. "It's my penance," she said, "and my purpose." Tommy Martinez had proven himself a hero once again, though the weight of what he'd seen and done showed in his eyes. Caleb made him foreman of the ranch, giving him responsibility to match his premature maturity. That night, as Claire and Caleb stood on their porch, the place where so many crucial moments of their story had unfolded, she asked him, "Do you regret it?" "The violence, the danger. We could have just rebuilt the ranch, quietly lived peaceful lives." "Could we?" Caleb asked. "Could you have lived peacefully knowing women were being taken, families destroyed while we did nothing?" "No," she admitted. "I couldn't. Neither could I. My uncle knew that. It's why he started this fight. We just finished it. For now." "For now," he agreed. "But that's enough. We've given this territory a chance at justice, at peace. What happens next is up to the next generation." Clara took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "Then we'd better raise them right." "We will. With your teaching and my stubbornness, our children will be forces of nature." Children, plural. "Well, we can't stop at just one. The school needs students, doesn't it?" Clara laughed. The sound carrying across the desert. It was the laugh of a woman who'd faced hell and survived, who'd found love in the midst of violence, who'd helped transform a lawless territory into something approaching civilization. Inside the house, the lamp burned bright, the same lamp that had welcomed Caleb home months ago, when this all began. But now it wasn't just a sign of habitation. It was a beacon of hope, of justice, of the triumph of good people over evil circumstances. The next morning brought normalcy of a sort Clara had never thought she'd experience again. She taught her classes while Caleb worked with the ranch hands. Dr. Campbell tended to Maggie's broken leg while she recovered in their guest room. Life moved forward, building on the foundation of their struggles. A month later, a package arrived from Washington. Inside was a medal from the president himself commending their service to the territory. There was also a letter offering Caleb a position as a federal marshal. He showed it to Clara that evening. "What do you think?" "I think you'd make a wonderful marshal, but do you want it?" Caleb looked out at the ranch, at the school, at the community they'd built. "No, I've found what I was looking for. My uncle left me more than land, he left me a purpose. And that purpose is here, building something good with you." Clara kissed him. "Good answer." As winter approached, the ranch prospered. The silver mine's profits funded improvements throughout the valley. Better roads, a proper medical clinic, even a library that Clara had insisted upon. Bitter Creek grew from a frightened town into a thriving community. The trials from Perdition Falls made national news. The scope of the trafficking network shocked the nation, leading to new federal laws and increased funding for territorial law enforcement. Margaret Shaw's agency expanded, recruiting women like Catherine Maxwell, who understood both worlds, the privileged and the persecuted. On a cold December morning, Clara stood in her classroom, now expanded to accommodate 40 students. She was showing them a map of the territory, marking all the towns that had been freed from criminal control. "Remember," she told her students, "freedom isn't free. It requires constant vigilance, courage, and the willingness to stand up for what's right. Your generation will face different challenges than ours, but the principles remain the same." Young Maria Rodriguez raised her hand. "Mrs. Dawson, were you really scared when those bad men came?" "Every single time," Clara admitted. "But being scared doesn't mean you can't be brave. In fact, true courage is acting despite your fear." "Like Mr. Dawson." Clara smiled, seeing her husband through the window, teaching Tommy and the younger ranch hands how to break horses. "Exactly like Mr. Dawson." That evening, as snow began to fall, rare for the territory but not unheard of, Clara and Caleb walked through their domain. The ranch had tripled in size, with families of workers living in comfortable homes, children playing in the streets, the sound of civilization replacing the silence of abandonment. "My uncle would be amazed," Caleb said. "He'd be proud," Clara corrected. "This is exactly what he envisioned." They stopped at the small cemetery they'd established on a hill overlooking the valley. Tom Dawson's grave was there, moved from town, along with markers for those who'd died fighting for justice, including Rose and the others who'd fallen at Perdition Falls. "We did it, Tom," Caleb said quietly. "We finished what you started." The wind whispered through the sage, and for a moment Clara could almost hear a response, approval perhaps, or just the eternal voice of the desert acknowledging another chapter in its long history. As they walked back to the house, Clara felt the baby move for the first time, a flutter like butterfly wings, a promise of the future. She grabbed Caleb's hand, placing it where he could feel it too. "Life," she said simply. "Life," he agreed, understanding all that the word encompassed: their survival, their love, their future, and the continuing cycle of building something better for those who would come after. The lamp in their window glowed steadily, a constant star in the desert darkness. The Dawson Ranch, once a place of death and despair, had become a beacon of hope, and Clara Whitmore, who'd arrived as a desperate fugitive, had become Clara Dawson, teacher, fighter, survivor, and soon mother to a new generation that would inherit a territory transformed by courage and sacrifice. The story that had begun with a knife trembling in a frightened woman's hand had become legend in the Arizona Territory. Proof that even in the harshest ground, with enough determination and love, justice could take root and flourish. The drifter and the school teacher had not only survived, but had helped forge a new world from the ashes of the old. And in the spring, when their child was born, a daughter, they named Rose after the brave woman who'd given her life for others, the desert bloomed with unexpected flowers, as if the land itself was celebrating the triumph of hope over despair, of love, over violence, of a future built on the courage of those who refused to surrender.